What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
Together a heck of a team. Well,
to be quite honest, Mike, you talk about persuasion. I think that the way that it shows up in leadership is do you have the ability to motivate and inspire, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way that we persuade as leaders, because it's not a tactical transaction. We have to actually encourage our people to develop an entire mindset, right? But if I'm not living it in my own personal life, becoming a better version of myself, as a husband, as a father, as a digital marketer, as an investor, as a creator, an innovator, right? Then it's going to be very difficult for my employees to adopt it on their own, right? I think there's a lot of leaders out there that want to manage through fear mongering, right? Or they want to manage to KPIs, but then they're not really like practicing what they preach. Well, guess what? You're never going to be able to actually truly motivate and inspire people if you don't live it yourself.
Yeah, it makes sense then. So you're talking about, getting people around you and the importance of growth, people wanting growth, growing development. I've had a lot of fun watching you. Before we got online today, I said, you're not the same person that I first met. It's really cool to see. I mean,
I'm a little skinnier too. That helps.
I was going to bring that up because people didn't see the before and the after, but I noticed that when the camera kicked in, and they say that it gave you 10 extra pounds. So I'm not sure how skinny you are now. So, but Jeremy, when you do self-reflection, I know you've been going through a lot of that in the last year, but from a self-reflection standpoint, what's the biggest growth that you personally have gone through from early days to where you are now?
Man, I mean, that's a whole hour podcast just answering that question, right? But what I can say is in my 20s, I was just so consumed with making money, right? Like just make money, and it almost came at whatever cost it took. And, sometimes that meant that I had to look the other way whenever I knew that one of my recruiters was utilizing unethical practices, right? Changing employment date ranges or changing titles or, encouraging a candidate to update their LinkedIn to reflect a certain skill set. And it wasn't until I had the discipline and confidence to let those people go to where I had this like burden that came off of my shoulders, right? But I used to think that like, oh my God, like revenue production is the end all be all. If I don't have people that can create revenue, then my business is going to fail. And once I realized that, no, I need to create a system that is built on characteristics that are all hinged on excellence and integrity and doing what you say, but more so saying what you're going to do, right? Like having continuity, having a brand that people trusted, that had credibility, right? That if I could build the system and people that fit the core values, then I knew that my revenue was always going to be insulated because we were doing it the right way. And so I think that that's, really migrating away from thinking that I needed to like focus on revenue, but more so focus on doing business the right way. That was a big transformative experience for me. Because then, the amount of drama or conflict, right, was significantly reduced. The risk and exposure related to potential lawsuits or even cybersecurity attacks and what so, like whenever you're actually like proudly paying your taxes, whenever you're like treating your people well and compensating them well and giving them upward mobility opportunities and creating golden handcuffs, right, doing business the right way was really the secret to success, I would say.
Yeah. So that's where the internal growth for you, I think, has come from. Just as an outside observer, it has to do with learning to do a better job of sort of managing yourself and how you respond to situations and circumstances. has been a huge metamorphosis. I've also seen this awesome focus on helping people achieve what they want, and that's a loud message that you have, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's funny. There was a new guy that started a couple of weeks ago. His name is Tyler. He actually came from one of our clients, as a matter of fact. And we just so happened to be in the elevator bay, right? One day when we were leaving at 5:30. And the new employees don't get a tremendous amount of face time with the CEO, right? They have team managers, and then they have their division presidents that they work with. But the light bulb that I even came to in that moment was the times where I was most proud of myself, right? I've got, 5 Rolexes and AP. I've got all these fancy watches, but the one that means the most to me, Mike, was my very first 36 millimeter date just stainless steel on a fluted bezel. I bought that watch used from Hal Martin's Watches on Westheimer for $4,400. That's my favorite Rolex because it was my first one. Mm-hmm. And so the point that I'm making is that as we get later career, we've experienced so much success. We've won deals, we've lost deals, we've won, we've landed big enterprise accounts, we've lost accounts, right? We've started families, we've had kids, they've experienced all of this success. There comes a point in time where you're a little bit desensitized to the highs and even a little bit desensitized to the lows. And that's why you can kind of keep going forward to where you realize that the real stuff that creates a lot of excitement and pride is whenever people are experiencing things for the very first time. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure, very much so.
But the largest invoice that we sent out last year, 2025, was $864,000. That was our transaction fee. We moved a 16-person team from one client to another, and we charged a fee on everybody. But the one that means the most was a candidate that we placed in 2018, right? We moved her from JP Morgan Securities to LPL Financial, and our fee was $117,000. That was my very first 6-figure invoice that I ever charged. And I'll be honest with you, that's the one that meant the most to me, man. We threw a party. We went out. It was the most unbelievable experience in the world. And when we sent out the 800K, it wasn't about Jeremy. It wasn't about Casey. It was about Katie McNabb, the recruiter that helped originate that deal. She was the one that we got to highlight, right? Because what did that mean to her? That was her first one. Yep. So that's what, maybe it's like me becoming a dad is probably what, changed my mindset. It wasn't about me. It was about my kids. What were the trophies that they were hoisting? My son winning an AAU basketball championship, was way more exciting than me buying a new house in Tanglewood, Yeah,
very much so. So it's that ability to be able to look and help others, like I said, achieve their dreams, their goals, come along and walk alongside of them. So I
want to share one more thing, Mike.
Go ahead.
If you have people on your team that are not fired up about achieving their goals and achieving their dreams and becoming better, husbands and fathers and investors and cold callers and creators and marketers, then you're using a roster spot that somebody else could take on those same exact job orders, making the same exact cold calls to the same exact LinkedIn projects. You're holding somebody back if you're putting somebody or keeping somebody in that roster spot that's not fired up about growth.
Yeah, I've always believed. My experience was I kept somebody in the desk longer than I should have, and whenever they left, the other team would come around and goes, "Why were they here that long?" I mean, it was all you'd see that. And what I learned over the years is that nature abhors a vacuum. Right? Nature abhors a vacuum, meaning that is if there's a vacuum, nature will fill it. Mm-hmm. And what takes place is that whenever we have somebody in a role that is not performing, and meeting their expectations, our expectations, it's better to be able to make, as you said earlier, the tough decision, recognizing that now you're your focus will be on finding somebody else to put into that particular role. It's to move forward with that.
And the cool thing is the person that takes over that role inherits all of the good things that the predecessor had. If you actually have processes and systems, right? Yep. If they were filling out the CRM with the right contacts, if you understand where every single deal is in the pipeline, if you've got SOPs and training resources and things of that nature, then you keep 80% of the good, but then you lose 80% of the bad, and you start fresh with somebody that's really fired up about being successful. That's very, very powerful.
Very, very much so. And you're the first person I'm getting a chance to talk to about this because it's new for me. I've got a sign on my wall over here I put up. It says noise. And the reason for that recently is I've heard about Steve Jobs and that he was exceptional at eliminating the noise. And noise is not unimportant data. It just has to do with what are my 3 things that are most important for me to be focused on. Everything else is noise. And I actually, when I heard that a couple of weeks ago, that word's been daily. It's like this morning I was doing something, I caught myself, wait a minute, that's noise. Don't do that. Because the challenge we have as leaders no matter what the industry is there's so much stuff we have to do. You've been able to grow because of being able to keep your focus, what do they call it, the eye on the target, keep your eye on the horizon. What have you learned to do that helps you to be able to ferret through the noise and to be able to stay focused on those things that are most important?
Yeah, great question. So really 2 things. We operate on EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, that gives us quarterly offsite meetings where our executive team can identify, discuss, and solve problems. We can address any bottlenecks in the organization. We could talk about the strategic initiatives that we need to implement that quarter, right? And so it's really that continuity and that clarity that help keep us on track to continually improve, right? But really the second part that might surprise you is I've developed the ability to have really, really tough conversations with people, right? I was just in a meeting with somebody that we're going to be onboarding as our manager of AI operations, right? Who's helped us integrate a full-scale system implementation that's going to create about a $20,000 a month ad spend for video ad campaigns through social media, right? Because we've identified what's going to take to get from 12.5 million to 50 million, right? And it's going to be really difficult to build it on people. It really needs to be on processes and technology, right? But with that being said, the people on the call were my little brother, who's been with the organization for 11 years, right? My director of systems and technology that has been with the organization for over 13 years, right? And my fiance, right, who's helping us with some marketing project management. She just graduated with her master's in marketing from U of H. But what I'm getting at is those first 2 people that I mentioned that have been with me for over 10 years, if I didn't have the ability to have really open, honest, tough conversations about what they needed to do in order to improve, in order for us to help achieve the results that we need to in order to get to the next level, hey, guess what? Those guys would have been managed out of the organization, right? And I think us as leaders, we are scared to address the elephant in the room, right? We're scared to give very, very direct feedback. But guess what? If my video guy is dropping the ball because he's not being innovative or creative, if one day I'm just fucking mad at him, oh, sorry, I dropped an F-bomb, but and I let him go, that's like doing him a disservice. I bet you if I would have told him, hey, we need to be more creative, we need to be more innovative, we need to be more enterprise, I'd be willing to bet that he would surprise himself on what he would be capable of, as long as he had very, very direct, honest, authentic feedback, right? Yeah, but I think that we all know sometimes they can't handle the feedback. Sometimes they fold. Sometimes they quit. Sometimes they give up, right? And that's just the cost of doing business, and that's perfectly okay. And whenever we have a successor in that role that wants it, then they're going to succeed.
Yeah, so there's 2 pieces in here that you talk about that I think that are critical. and whether it be monthly, quarterly, weekly, or whatever, but it's you value the time to reset, which is taking the EOS model and come back and pull the people in the room and making that at that moment, at that time, just as important and maybe even more important than going and serving a client. And that's a mistake I think we run into as leaders. What happens is we think that this time of pulling people together in community, it's a feel-good time, which is not. It feeds into the second piece that you talk about as far as the tough conversations. In the last 2 years in particular, I've spent more time working with leaders on the subject of clarity. The subject of clarity, because I believe that's the number one role we have as a leader, is to find out what is not clear. Because if I got clarity, as soon as I've got clarity about a situation or circumstances, what happens, I can increase the performance around people because I will get their buy-in. And if I don't get their buy-in, I will never get their commitment.
Yep.
And so the tough conversation sometimes is just, it's feedback. As long as I learn how to deliver it in a way that is going to be something they can process. I can't just, you and I talked before about my book, Equipped to Lead, Extraordinary Power of Emotional Intelligence. EQ is, do I react or do I respond effectively? Mm-hmm. And so with that clear message, that feedback, being able to point out, like you said, the elephant in the room is critical for leaders. We can't run from it. As long as we can wrap our arms around and help that person receive it in a way. Now they make a choice on do they want to do something with it.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
So it's huge then. So, Jeremy, there's so many pros, and you're right. I've looked at my clock on this. I'm laughing at myself. We should have booked 3 hours on this, but nobody would have listened to us for 3 hours. But you and I would have had fun. I'd love to have some time, later on in the year maybe to come back and talk about other things as things continue to unfold for you, and as I continue on this message that I have this year about helping leaders learn how to get the noise out of our lives. If somebody wants to reach out to you, Jeremy, I'll put this in the show notes, but what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, if somebody is listening and they're saying, hey, look, my leadership team, they kind of just leave us alone. I don't have a ton of resources. I make 150, 200 grand. That's good enough, right? Hey, that person's probably not a good fit. But if someone's making 150, 200, and they're saying, I want to make $500,000 a year, my company is not helping me do that, they need to come to Encore Search. And so if you want to talk to us about what it looks like for you to bring your book of business and your subject matter expertise to our firm, please DM me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Jensen with a little goat emoji, right? I look at all of my DMs. It's not AI powered. It's not automation. I don't use the Philippines to do automated posts, even though people ask me all the time, who does your content? It's actually me. So shoot me a DM. I would love to talk to you.
Super. Jeremy, thanks so much for your time, and I wish you great luck and success in 2026 as you continue to scale.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.